idea how difficult it was to make a shirt. But the glasses shouldn't be so bad, right? Oh boy, this isn't good. I think I have enough material now to finish off this tutorial. Let's get started with this project. Now, in case you missed the last few videos, this is the airbrush that we are going to be using on this project, the Gravity Feed Badger 105 Aero. And this is what we're going to use to paint the blues and the trousers, which are going to be gray. And as you can see here, I have already removed the cape and I've filled it in with epoxy sculpt. I've just got to wait for it to dry, sand, and paint. So the whole purpose of this project is to produce a Clark Kent that we otherwise will not ever have from any of these production companies. We do have a Clark Kent maybe in a formal wear, but we don't have one where he's taking off the shirt and he actually is Clark Kent turning into Superman. So this was the whole purpose of it. And this figure is comprised of two different figures, Dark Knight Returns Joker and the Dark Knight Returns Superman. As reference material, I am using what you see in the iPad at the far right, and this is what I want to emulate in my final work. And as you can tell here, I will also be using the boots from the Superman Dark Knight Returns, simply because I don't like the boots on the Joker. I will not be using any other part from the Joker body except for the trousers themselves. I do have to extend with epoxy sculpt the end of that hem at the bottom to cover up the ball joint on the red shoes or boots that I will then be painting black. So take a good look at the two figures, as they are not going to look like this at all when we are completely finished from what you have already seen in the beginning clip. The trousers will be a darker gray, and of course the Superman himself, which in this case Clark Kent, will also have a designed tie, and we're going to have the glasses for him, and of course those red boots are going to be painted black. And yes, we are going to be using the Vallejo Premium paint. Let's take a look at the project. So the most difficult thing about this project was making the shirt. I ended up making 6 garments, well, to be happy with the last one. It was just incredibly difficult. But with any shirt or any garment you're going to make, you always need a pattern. Now you can trace out the figure on paper directly, however you have to remember that the proportions are not true. So if you find tutorials on YouTube how to do this, they're usually geared toward the 1/6 figures, and those are usually like a Ken and Barbie doll, and the proportions are a little smaller. Here we have proportions that are just not real. So you have to make excess room for the actual hemming and the actual sewing so that you don't end up with a tiny shirt. Well, it's still going to be tiny, but you want it to be the exact size for the shirt or for this body. And that's where I ended up having trouble. Even though I made the extra room for the actual sewing, I still ended up with a smaller shirt. Like I said, it took me 6 tries to get this right. Now here's a look at some of my attempts in getting this correct. Here's my patterns, here's my excess material. This is actually the first one. It just didn't work out, obviously. So I went on to the second. Now the pattern is a bit better and neatly cut, etc. However, it is still incorrect. It does not fit the figure. It is still too small. And I'll show you why as to what happened here. Even though I did trace it out, I did not make the excess room for the sewing. I went ahead and added wires to the front because I really wanted to have a posable front of the shirt. It didn't work. It didn't allow me to do the sewing correctly. Now, as you can tell here, the key point is to attach these two, but I really had a difficulty attaching the sleeves. It was so difficult. And as you can tell, I didn't really have the exact size. Even though I went ahead and tried to hem the cuffs on here, didn't work because I was using that iron-on glue strip. So it made the cuffs very stiff and it made it difficult to do any sewing. The wire here, although it looks great here, it made it difficult to do any kind of sewing or putting it back together. Now, before we go back to the shirt, I want to share with you these glasses that somebody referred to me in the group, and these are awesome. I got these off of eBay, and these are 3 different sizes, a 1/12 scale, a 1/10 scale for the McFarlanes, and there's also a 1/8 scale. I'm going to be using the 3rd from the bottom here on the left. These are the correct model for the Clark Kent. Now, it is a plastic backing that is holding these, I guess they're die cut, and they're incredibly thin, so they're a bit fragile. Using my X-Acto knife to remove it, you just slide the blade underneath from one end to the other, and since it's already been die cut, it already has those I guess they're creases or predetermined cuts where it's going to bend to make the earpiece along the sides. It's really, really nice, and it saves me a lot of work, a lot of time. There's absolutely no way I can make this out of a wire. At least it's not going to look as neat as this. They're a bit tricky to place on the tiny little face here, but once you have them on there, you can glue them down. And wow, what a difference the glasses do make. Definitely a great disguise for a Clark Kent. So one more thing before we get back to that tedious shirt, let me show you the tie, which was also tedious, but it wasn't as difficult to make. It's really just a narrow piece of material, and it's narrow at one end, even wider at the other end, folded in half with the iron-on tape, and then of course with a wire going down through the edge. Now I probably should have made it even thinner, narrower, but it is really difficult to make things this tiny. Now I went ahead and cut out strips of tape to tape over the actual tie to make the diagonal design. And then I went ahead and cut out even more tape to make additional patterns along the same tie, airbrushing it with the ink or paint, whichever one you want to use. And then after you do this, you have to remember that if it's going to be in the air or it's going to be visible, well, the back is going to be exposed, or the interior of the tie. So you have to fold over those pieces of tape and create the design all the way around. And this is where it becomes tedious, because each one of these has to be individually folded over, and then painting this side as well. Now once you remove the tape off of your tie, you will end up with a very nice clean design. And if you did this right, you won't have to do it again. It looks really, really sharp. Let me show you what this looks like. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, because that's what drives this channel. Let's keep going. Alright, let's get back to the shirt to get this thing finalized. As I said, I actually made 6 of these. This is here in view, my 5th one. I'll show you the 6th one at the end. But I had to recut my patterns. I had to make them a bit neater and larger. These are the sleeves, these are the front panels, this is the back and the top of the back where the shoulders are. And of course, then I've got the cuffs, and then I also have the seams for the button areas, and of course the collar. And that's 2 pieces on the collar. And I had to make these a little bit larger because any smaller, they're really, really difficult to handle in the sewing machine. So once I had everything set up, this time I did sew the areas that needed to be sewn so it could have some stability. This collar was just too narrow, too small. I couldn't cover the tie. I had to make it a little bit bigger. And I just didn't like the needle work or the stitching that was showing in the collar. It just distracted me too much. So I had to do this with tape. But let me show you what it turned out. Now this is shirt number 6. Now I did sew everything here that you can see in the screen here, and I ended up with that center collar piece. This is the back panel in the front. I made 2, one for the front, one for the back. And as you can see, the horizontal line there, that's the one that I used to make my sewing on the back of the shirt, which is just slightly around the shoulder area. Looks like I went a little too far, too low. But anyway, it still works. Now the whole key thing here is that you have to sew this shut with the inside out, and then you have to turn it back inside, and then you can actually cut to make the front panel. But as you can tell here, it's easier to do it this way and sew it together than a piece at a time trying to finalize each piece. This is what it would look like on the Superman once we have it closed together. And you can tell that it actually is a correct size for this Superman. Keep in mind that if you have too much of an excess material, it's going to be difficult to install the legs back onto the hip joint when you put this back together. So you'll have to do with minimal material on the bottom. So by pre-assembling the shirt in this fashion, sewing this entire thing together, then at the very end, once it's sewn shut, I will then add the cuffs, and then I will add the actual collar. And as you can tell here, it actually is pretty small, but once you open it and you cut that front panel in half, that collar is going to extend, and you may find that it's a little bit larger. Now, as far as closing it together with the inside out, make sure all of your edges meet, and then proceed sewing at the edge at least 1/8 of an inch inside so that you can have enough material to grab securely. I have pre-hemmed the actual cuff on the shirt so that I can attach it later with glue. Here it is already closed shut, and now I am going to cut the front panel in half. Now keep in mind that for you to cut this correctly, it's best to make a crease. You're only going to get one shot at this, otherwise you're going to have to start over. And this is already shirt number 6 for me. So now I am turning it back out so I can have the nice view of the shirt and have my seams on the inside. And now I am going to proceed to add the details to the shirt. So once you turn your shirt back to what it's supposed to look like, put the inside back in and put the outside on the outside, make a test fit, and this will really let you know if your sewing skills actually took place, because if they did not, you're going to have some seams coming apart here. And the shirt is not going to close because we actually do want it open. We want the actual symbol to show, but as you can tell here, we've got some excess material here. It's where we can cut some of that away. We need to close in on the cuff here because we don't want it to look square. We want it to look fitted. Now here's the shirt itself completed. I went ahead and added the collar with the iron-on tape, the cuffs with the iron-on tape on both sides, and at the back, here's the key thing. See that pleat? If you don't make that pleat in the back, you're going to have a tough time meeting up the corners on the collar. Once you slice it open in half like that, that collar is going to stretch out. That pleat is going to bring the collar back together to the correct size. Now, as you can tell, the inside panel on the seam on the shirt, I extended it further because I don't want the actual seam to show. I just want it to look like a shirt. I did not add buttons to the end or the right hand side because as it's folded over, you're really not going to see them. I only added buttons to the cuffs themselves. And as you can tell, you need to remove the hands before fitting the shirt. The hands are too big now to go through the end of that cuff. So now you can do a final test fit and add the hands on the actual peg to keep that cuff in place. And you can tell that it's taken shape already after 6 attempts. There's no wires in here yet. All the stiffness that's there is from the actual tape. And now the collar should cover the tie around the back. Now the collar itself may be a little bit larger than what should be for a scale this size, but it's incredibly difficult to make one that is so tiny and actually scale around that tie. This is as close as I could get. So you've made it to the end of this video, which is adding the red cape. And as you can tell, it is not a full cape because there's no way it's going to fit in there. We just need to simulate that there's a cape under the shirt. It's basically the same steps that I've taken in making capes as I've done in some of the other videos. It's just a miniature version of it. It's cotton cloth that it's folded over and it's held together with the iron-on tape. And now I will be adding the emblem, which I had cut on a Cricut cutter. Beautiful, beautiful work from that machine. Very clean cuts. There's no way I can do this with paint or cutting this out with an X-Acto knife. So having the Cricut machine do this is a much quicker and much more precise way to get these logos on here. Once you get your cape cut down, you want to install it in the same holes or spaces that were left by that plastic cape. You will place it upside down, glue it in, and then you see that styrene in the back? I just cut off the corners and I placed them inside where these glue areas are, and I pushed them down to create some pressure to keep that cape down. It's not glued down anywhere else but inside those pieces or cavities left behind by the cape. And this is what we have now. All we got to do is add the glasses. Yeah, it was tedious, but yes, it can be done. Once you've got them down, glue them in. So I'm going to leave you now with a presentation of Clark Kent, my version of it. Yours can certainly vary from this. Every artist has a different viewpoint. And of course, keep in mind that it is a higher level of craftsmanship, and it is going to take you longer than usual. That shirt is difficult to produce. If you're a great tailor, then you've got one on me. It took me a while. But this is the finished presentation. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. That's what drives this channel. If you want to see more content like this, then of course, come back, subscribe, and of course, any question you've got, I will certainly try to answer. I will now leave you with some before and after shots and an ending video clip. We'll see you here next time.